Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are getting off the Bruce train tonight, though I'm sure he will come up, as he often does, and we're talking a little bit of music. We're talking about empowerment, and we're just having a really good time. So, welcome to the podcast, Sasha.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I am super jazzed to be here. This is going to be great.
Good. Tell us a little about yourself.
So, my name is Sasha Moreau, and I am lots of things that you need to know. But first and foremost, within the context of this podcast, I am a working musician. I have been in the music industry as a professional for the last 20 years. I definitely have not hit the level of success that Bruce has, but then again, who has, right?
Yes.
But what Bruce and I do have in common is that I am what you would consider to be a blue collar working musician. I play lead guitar for a punk rock band based out of San Francisco. I live in Portland, Oregon, in the metro area up in the Pacific Northwest. We tour, we are DIY, we release our own records, we play to empty bars and to packed music halls around the country and up into Canada. We do have a record deal with a label up there, but it is very loose in terms of what record deal means. That's more of a DIY, like-minded people coming together and doing stuff together as a group, but not, it's a handshake agreement. And we are certainly not being put up at the Ritz every time we tour or anything like that. That's, for the context of tonight, that's really where I'm coming from, is my musical background. I also, as a side note, as a tangent, I am a performance artist, and I have made my living, in addition to music, as a professional magician for the last 20 years or so, doing large scale stage illusions in theaters around the world. I've done a run on Broadway in 2016. I was on America's Got Talent that same year. I've played everywhere from places in London to the Middle East and Australia and such. The arts, the performing arts, and music specifically, near and dear to my heart.
What is the connection between music and magic?
Oh my gosh, they're one and the same essentially when you
Okay.
really want to get down to it. So magic is at its best. And this, obviously, I'm sure that when I say magician, you have an image in your head of some birthday hack who's
Well,
pulling
so
a bunny puller.
in full disclosure, I am a massive follower of Penn Jillette's podcast.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
when I think of magician, I think of Penn and Teller and then all the people that hang around with him,
So we're
right?
okay.
Yeah.
You're in good company then. So
Yeah.
magic at its best is theater. It tells a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it tells the audience something about themselves. And music is an essential component of making that happen because music is how we connect emotionally as human beings. To stories specifically, that we can start around a campfire and stories will draw us in. But when you add music to something, either that the song is something you've heard and connect with emotionally because of you have a past with it or that evokes memories, or even if it's a sad piece and it's written in a minor key, that elevates everything. If it's a happy piece and a triumphant, large, sort of a revealing moment in magic where whatever it is that has been destroyed has now been put back together. If it's in a major key and with lots of huge stacked chords, music is essential to be able to make magic hit the way that it is supposed to, and that is in your heart, not just as an intellectual thing. And I'm sure Penn and I probably differ slightly on that, that I do not approach it on strictly an intellectual level. I am a storyteller and an actor on top of that. But yeah,
Well,
but him and Teller are great.
yeah, one of the things he talks about, right, is that he started as a juggler and he
Mhm.
hated magic because to him magic was lying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And he has said that one of the things him and Teller firmly believe is that no one should leave the audience at the end of the night thinking anything that happened was quote unquote real.
Absolutely agree with that sentiment. Yes.
Yeah.
And that comes down to the ethics of magic. They were always huge on if something is dangerous, that the audience needs to know that it is not actually dangerous because they did not pay to possibly be traumatized for the rest of their life if the performer
Yes.
messes everything up. And I'm right on board with that.
Yeah.
Because Penn Jillette, he is a fairly outspoken atheist and a
Yeah.
skeptic, and so he's in good company with the four horsemen of the new atheist movement and Sam
Yeah.
Harris and Richard Dawkins and
Yeah.
Christopher Hitchens back when he was still alive.
Yeah.
And Sam Harris is the only one of those four who who says that humans are hardwired to seek mystic experience, that
Yeah.
they require that on a psychological level. And I think for me, magic, when it is done properly, fulfills that sort of a sense of otherness and that there's something greater, even if we know at an intellectual level this is not actually happening. And it's cool. The more intelligent, the more educated you are, the easier you are to fool because the magicians find the chinks in the armor where you just go into something believing something because that is what your experience has been. Case in point, you and I are both wearing glasses. On a subconscious level, I have already assumed that there are lenses in yours,
Yes.
even though I don't have any proof of that fact. Now I can see them. Now we're talking about it. Same
Right.
with mine. But a magician might come out wearing glasses without lenses for some purpose. And because you've made that
Yeah.
assumption, all of a sudden he's up and in here.
Yeah, and I promise we'll get to music, but
Right.
hopefully I'm not boring you. But
Not
I'm
at all.
I'm fascinated by that good magic. We lie to ourselves. You're not lying to us. We are seeing things that we think we see, and it is. Penn talks about, and I'm going to get it wrong, the Jerry Seinfeld definition of magic is here's a coin, now it's not, you're an asshole. That's right. And yeah, I think that like the things with the TSA when they talked about that, when
Hmm.
they had the American flag, and are they burning American flag? Are they
Yep.
not? They tell those stories. And it is important to us, I think.
They occupy a space in the creative world that I think is essential. And I think that artists, as an overall group of people, need to do more in that vein. And what an artist does is they hold up a mirror to their audience and
Yes.
they tell their audience about themselves through their particular medium. And they talk about their own experience through their given medium. Now, magicians are a little weird on that because our medium is deception. And if you really want to get philosophic about it, I would say that magicians tell the truth by lying. They
Yes.
point to who we are and what we aspire to be by showing us things that are not real, and that reminds us of our capacity and our capabilities for what we could become, given that we assume the best parts of ourselves.
Yeah. And I think exactly, I had never connected that with music. Penn loves Dylan and a huge fan of all kinds of music. And I am a 65-year-old white guy that was born in Louisiana, moved to Dallas, Texas in 84, have lived here my whole life. I have never done manual labor. I have worked in a call center from the moment I was an adult. Yet Bruce Springsteen's out in the street working
Yep.
about on the docks is universal because that line, and on Friday, when on Monday, when the foreman calls time, I've already got Friday on my mind.
Yep.
And there
Absolutely
isn't
that.
a working person in America that on Monday morning isn't already thinking about Friday night.
And that's the universality of one of Bruce Springsteen in particular, but also two of music in general. That is being able to be a good storyteller and setting it to melody and setting it using the craft of music to be able to augment those emotions which you are trying to get across. And Bruce Springsteen does a really good job of that.
Yeah.
Dylan also really good job of
Yeah.
that.
So let's start out. I always like to start at the beginning. Where did you grow up and were your family into music?
Yeah, so I was born in Los Angeles, California, but I pretty immediately moved up to a small little ski town in the middle of the mountains in Northern California called Truckee. And if you've ever heard or read about the Donner Party, the ill-fated Donner Party, they were settlers that came from on the Oregon Trail, that happened in my hometown.
Oh,
I
nice.
I grew
Yay.
up, yeah, I grew up swimming in Donner Lake, and I came from, I would say that it was a musical family, not because we played a lot of instruments, but music is very important to my dad. It certainly was to my mom when she was alive. And music was just part of how we related to the world and to each other. And we would travel a lot. My dad was a businessman and used to parlay business trips. He would negotiate and say, look, you can pay me less if you want to, we'll pay for airfare over there if you want to put my family up as well. And then we can make it into a vacation. He'll work during the day and so on and so forth. And every city that we went to, whether it was in Europe, whether it was in the US or wherever, my dad would always go and grab the local rag or whatever it is,
Yeah.
the little newspaper, and he would find some concert, whether it was classical, whether it was jazz, whether it was sometimes it was a play or a musical, and we would go and engage in culture together, but music was a huge part of that. I was listening to music from the time I was an infant. Every day there was always something playing, and whether it was the Stones, whether it was the Beatles, all the way up to, I think my dad actually had an Iron Maiden record, Peace of Mind, which surprised
Nice.
me, and I really liked that one. But music was super important, and I became a musician early and started playing around with the piano at 7 and started formally studying music in school in the 6th grade with clarinet. And I quickly added the electric bass to that because I wanted to play punk rock music. And I somehow ended up with a really good balance of I studied classical music on string bass at school, and then after school, I was playing punk rock and listening to records and learning them by ear. And so I got to learn how to write a song and how to improvise while I was doing all of the technique and learning the theory and everything in school. And so music was a huge part of who I am. And you had asked me previously, tell us about yourself. I'll give you a super quick kind of a side note. And the reason why you and I connected in the first place is I have just started a company called Fairview, which is all about musicians and empowerment. And we are in the process of building a digital platform that will allow musicians to live stream their shows and to digitally sell tickets to monetize those shows directly to their fan base. So giving the money to the musicians, taking the middleman out away from labels or distributors, and allowing a direct interaction between fans and the bands that they love. And I'm actually started that company with my partner Telson, and he and I met in middle school band.
How fun. So I'm gonna come back to music in a minute,
Yeah.
but I have to ask, where did your love of magic start?
So magic is just so deep and wonderful. I can tell you where I first experienced it, and then I'll give you a super quick history because, there's not a whole lot of us who spend a whole career doing magic, and I understand that's a weirdo thing. We were on a family trip to Hawaii. My dad was working. We were on Kauai, and we had gone out to dinner in some strip mall or something. And my sister and I had finished dinner early, and there was a magic shop just across the parking lot. And so my parents were like, "Go, let us finish dinner."
Yeah, let us finish. Yeah.
Yep. And I went in, and the guy behind the counter, I don't know his name, but he was a demonstrator, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to see a trick?" And he showed me the sponge balls, and he showed me something called a hot rod, and just blew my mind. And I purchased those tricks there, and he taught me how to do them, and I practiced and started doing magic. And 6 months later, I emptied my savings account to go and buy the Mark Wilson Book of Magic, which I still have on my magic shelf back there. And I just went from there. It was the experience is really what happened of seeing something. I saw him place a single ball into my hand, and then I closed my hand, and it was there. It was in my hand. I could feel it. And then he disappeared the ball from his hand, and I opened mine, and there were two in there when I swear there had really only been the one. And that moment of having everything collide, what I knew was possible versus what I was seeing, and that moment of both being distraught and overcome with wonder was just, it was almost otherworldly and super cool. And I understand that sounds very cliche and cheesy, but
No,
it's
it
also
doesn't at
it's
all.
also the truth.
No. One of the questions I ask, and I'm going to ask you the same thing, is and usually, like, I will have someone who's a huge Bruce fan or a Stones fan or Janet Jackson, whatever. But in your case, I'm going to be more generic. Can you remember when you first discovered punk and what about it spoke to you?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because in the when you sent me the email about here's the run of the show,
Yep.
when did you first discover Bruce? And I was like racking my brain. I was like, oh my gosh, because my mom was a big Neil Diamond fan.
Okay.
And they were contemporaries and they had
Sure.
that male rocker crooner thing going on in the 70s. So I'm sure I discovered Bruce through Neil Diamond on the side. But for punk rock, I had a good friend of mine, my best friend as a kid. His name was Morgan. And he got into it somehow, his brother or something like that. But he gave me for my birthday in the 7th grade a CD by a band called NoFX. And the record was Punk and Drublick. And the first track was called Linoleum. And it started with some guy way off microphone in the back warming up. You could hear him singing. And then the track kicked in, and this drum beat was building. And then it like exploded and my blood started rushing and like I got all excited and like that beat just spoke to something primal in me that liked to go fast, that liked to be expansive and wild and crazy. And even now, I'm 43, I'm still playing in a punk rock band, and when that beat comes on, I still get excited. It was something that just touched me very deeply, and easily half the friends that I've ever made in my life were because of punk rock, music in general, but punk rock specifically, being on tour and meeting people out on the
Yeah.
road.
Who are some of your influences? What are some of your favorite artists and albums?
So I would say that I have an eclectic like of both different kinds of genres and artists, and that's because of the way that I was raised doing music. I was learning
Yeah.
classical, I was playing jazz, early bird at 6 a.m. I got into acting. One of my degrees is in theater, so I learned musical theater and how all of that works. I love listening to scores and composers. Danny Elfman was one of my favorites for years, Alan Silvestri. And then on the rock side, the punk rock explosion of the 90s, like I was 12 when that happened in 1994, and that was when Green Day and The Offspring and Bad Religion and Rancid all hit and exploded, and it was just the coolest music ever. So their big influences. NoFX is probably my favorite punk rock band of all time. I love Lagwagon. And interestingly enough, at this point in my career, I am starting to, or I started to maybe 5 years ago, play shows with a lot of these bands that I listened to growing up, and that has been an absolute pleasure to be able to get to know them off stage, and then hear the soundtrack of my life being played live when it was their turn to hit the stage, which is pretty incredible. If you're looking for albums in particular, I would say Lagwagon's Trashed is a beautiful record. I absolutely love NoFX Punk and Drublic, like I said. Anything by Bad Religion from those early years, although The Process of Belief is a huge one for me, and I'm sure that I don't know if Penn Jillette's into punk rock, but subject-wise, he absolutely would get on board with that because Bad Religion is a big skeptic band and big critique of
Yeah.
obviously religion being the first one, but
Yeah.
very big on free thought. And their lead singer, Greg Graffin, has a PhD and teaches at UCLA.
The so when was there a conscious moment when you said, I want to do this for a living?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure that there was. I think that it happened progressively and with every show that we did. And don't get me wrong, blue collar musician in today in 2025, even for someone who's been in the industry for 20 years, that means I've not been able to pay all of my bills with my music. I have
Yes.
played a lot of shows between music and magic, well over 1,000 in stages and basements and convenience stores and music halls all around the globe. But I have never been able to just have music be my focus. And that is because the music industry is not set up to support the people who make the music. It is set up to support the people who sign the musicians and then write them off as tax breaks when they fail, which sounds
So
very jaded.
just recently, Jason Isbell was being interviewed, and someone asked him about Spotify, and he said, I own my record company.
Mhm.
He said, so I get two checks. I get a check as the artist, and I get a check as the record company.
Yep.
Trust me, the record company check is a lot bigger than the artist one.
I can tell you. So my band is called United Defiance,
Okay.
and we have been on Spotify because you have to be. That is how people discover and listen to music these days.
Yes.
And I don't think I would be remiss in saying that Spotify and other streaming services, but Spotify specifically has a stranglehold on the culture right now.
Yeah.
We've been on Spotify for the last 6 years, and when I started Fairview with Telson back this last November, we pulled the data from my band. But over the course of 6 years, we have had 175,138 streams. That is we have a couple, two, three records up there and a bunch of singles and things. So our music has been played almost 200,000 times. For that amount of streams over the course of 6 years, we have been paid $380. Not every
Yes.
year, total.
Total.
And that works out to about 0.0023 cents per stream. So being in
Yes.
United Defiance on Spotify, it has paid me approximately $1.03 per month since I've been in there. We're a five piece, we split everything five ways.
And I think one of the things, and I'm going to sound like a grumpy old man,
Do it.
is that you you would used to be you would have to go to a record company, a record
Mhm.
store, talk to the guy or gal, what's good? Oh, you should try this. And you would pay 15 bucks, 10 bucks for a CD, an album, whatever it is. I'm dating myself. And then sometimes you'd like it, sometimes you wouldn't. And so the beauty of Spotify is someone said, I had someone talking to me. I had a friend who's Canadian and he said, I want to do an episode on the tragic hip.
Yeah,
And so I was able to listen to them and I went, okay, I like this. I'm now going to go buy an album or a
yeah,
CD.
yeah.
The problem is most people don't do that connection.
Correct. So you are doing it the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah,
You are supporting the artist by doing that, and you're absolutely correct. So one of the reasons why we created Fairview
yeah,
is to be able to provide musicians with the opportunity to take control of their finances by being able to, like I said, where the platform is the combination of services that are already existing all together in one place. So think about YouTube combined with Twitch or Patreon combined with Shopify. So a storefront where you can buy merch from the band that you love. There's a place for media on demand so you can watch past shows that you love or that you wanted to share with the people that you care about and you play music with. And then if you're in Texas and my band is playing in Portland here, you're not going to be able to make the trip regardless of how big a fan you are. Not every time, even if you wanted to. But if I were able to hit a button as the artist and just put a camera on stage and then have that feed go to you live and charge something, and it's up to the artist with our model of how we're doing that. That money is going to go directly to that musician as opposed to some third party, which is going to take 95% of it and then give them a pittance. Thank you for discovering the artist on Spotify and then going and supporting them. That's my hat is off to you, and thanks for that. But you're right. Record sales aren't really a thing of that is happening anymore. It's a thing of the past.
yeah. My friend Sarah Hickman, who is was a full-time musician as well, and she talked about she was lucky enough to figure out a way to support her family with music. But she talks about that the checks she get are ridiculous. And I know, like, it appears one of my other podcasts is John Hyatt. We do a John Hyatt podcast where
Sure.
we're talking about his songs in alphabetic order. And it
Nice.
appears yeah, it's fun. And he's now with what it sounds similar to your record company is you make it, you produce it, and we will distribute it. You have to have a distribution method.
Yeah,
We have that, but we're not going to advance you money. We're not going to put our finger in the pie. We're
correct.
just, you go make your music and they will help you share it. And it's just, I had a lot of people, especially during COVID. I always love having musicians on the podcast, whether they're Bruce fans or not. And I would ask this question. I said, okay, you you scrape together, you get your money, and you do an EP or a CD, and you then you you publish it, you make them, and then you go to the local bar
Yep.
and you play, and you hope you sell enough CDs to get a tank of gas and a mailing list. You just keep, okay, I'm going to build my network of fans. I'd ask, so what do you do now that it's COVID? And we would have a really interesting discussion. But that is not a model that works anymore, is it, Sasha?
It's not really because for a couple of reasons. And first off, COVID is the reason why Fairview that's where my co-founder
Well, talk to me a little more about that. Yeah,
yeah,
let's delve into that for a minute.
so that's where he got the idea. He is in live production, so he is a musician himself, but he has gone more towards the technical side. He's an audio engineer and then has been a technical director doing live applications up in Tahoe for the last decade. So he's live mixed everyone from the Beach Boys to I don't know if he's ever done Bruce. He might have done Rod Stewart, like big names and
Okay.
middle festivals and everybody. And during COVID, everything shut down, and he was one of the ones who in the region, he started doing a live stream and figured out how to get rid of the lag, how to get rid of all of the issues, because people were trying to do that, but there was no consistency with it.
Yeah.
And he started by broadcasting for the school district ski races because the parents couldn't be up on the slope due to social distancing. So he set a remote camera, a series of them, and he was able to record kids doing their ski races and live stream that to the parents down, down at the bottom of the hill who couldn't be up there to see that live. And that idea started working on him, and he and I've been both been in the industry long enough to know how it works. I will say, so the model that you were talking about of you cut a record and I'm dating myself by using that term now too.
Yeah.
You record an album
Yeah.
and you go out on tour. One thing that I would mention is that tour, you're living hand to mouth, most of us. And the vast majority of
Yes.
us, that is our vacation. If you have a day job, you can't just up and be like, hey, I'm going to be gone. You have to save that up. That's your vacation that you're going to be using for the year. And you go and try to make enough money to get gas to get to the next town. And you do that year after year. And yes, your audience does grow exponentially as you're doing that, but it's just not fast enough to be able to support. So Fairview came from a desire to empower musicians to be able to give them an opportunity to connect with their fans just like you would in a live environment, because live music is magic. That really
It
is.
is. Yeah.
I believe there was a. You'll have to take this with a grain of salt, but this morning on my Fairview feed, I saw a study that was talking about if you go to a concert every 2 weeks or thereabouts, seeing live music, it'll add 9 years to your life. I don't know if it's true, but I can see where the concept is because you are connected with other human beings that care about something that you do, and that synergy is just electric. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Fairview wanted to be able to capture that live and to be able to allow bands to connect with their fans and back and forth. And how much more would you be willing to give if you knew your money was directly supporting someone being able to write the music which has created the soundtrack of your life, to be able to pay their bills and make sure that their kids have got clothing to go to school in and food in their mouths. I've got 2 kids myself, and as a musician, I've had to take a whole bunch of interesting, weirdo, off the cuff jobs to be able to make ends meet while still doing what I love. And the reason I do it is because I love it. It's because I am compelled to do so as an artist. It's almost a calling.
Mm.
But man, it would be much easier and much more productive for me and for the other musicians out there if we were able to pay our bills more effectively using our art.
Yeah. When you shared how you found your love of magic, did you perform growing up? Did you, once you got the book and started playing with it?
I did, yes. I did a couple of birthday shows here and there, and it was mostly disastrous and in a fun way. I always had loved magic. I stepped away from it a little bit for a while. And then when I was a junior in high school, my dad, off the cuff, like he always would, I was playing basketball in front of the house, just shooting hoops, and he came up and he was like, "Hey, you want to go see a magic show tonight?" And I was like, "Of course, let's go and do that." So he took me from Truckee down to Reno, Nevada, is kind of the closest big city to where I
Right.
grew up. And we went to the Flamingo Hilton with my family, my mom and my sister, and we saw a magic show called Carnival of Wonders. And this actually, I'll tell you what my favorite Bruce Springsteen song is now, and it's
Okay.
because of this magic show.
Okay.
The favorite song is called "The Last Carnival."
Okay.
And it's off of the Working on a Dream
Sure.
record, 2008 or 9, something like
Right.
that. But this show, Carnival of Wonders, it had 3 illusionists in it. There was a guy named Mark Kalin, there was his wife Ginger Kalin with a J, and then there was a guy named Jeff Hobson. And the 3 of them had put together a show that emulated a carnival. So you walked in, the theater was all tented just like the inside of a large tent, and every like section of the show was reflective of the places in a carnival. So they had the Tunnel of Love, they had the House of Horrors, they had the Illusionarium, and each one of those vignettes had an illusion, had a bit of magic to it that encapsulated a feeling of that. So you felt like you were going through a carnival, through the midway, and getting to see all of the sideshows as you were going until the last moment. And it was the most beautiful, stunningly pure, and deeply moving thing that I had ever seen in my life. Without hyperbole, at 17, I sat there in the dark and One, I thought I had no idea that humans were capable of doing something like that. And two, I want to work with them. And I turned to my mom and I said, one day I will work with them. And it turns out they're the ones that I've spent the last 20 years with. I was able to, out of college, to get an interview with them out of the blue 2 weeks before I was going to move to Europe for a job. And my life completely took a left turn at the stoplight. And I ended up doing magic with them for 2 decades. Still see them. I actually just finished a gig with Ginger in St. Louis about 3 days ago. We just did an installation of an illusion show for Six Flags for a guy named Brad Ross.
How fun.
Yeah.
Percentage wise, how much time do you spend with the music, feeding the music soul, and how much time on the magic soul or the
Would-
pocketbooks?
No, I totally get you. I would say decently it's about 50-50.
Okay.
And the magic has provided me with the means to be able to have a living and pay my bills. Not all the time. I used to teach high school for 5 years. That was a good steady income that I was then able to focus on the music portion because I wasn't touring. That was around everything crashed in 2008, and for the
Yeah.
next 5-6 years I was teaching French and theater specifically, which was awesome. And then when the magic thing would come back, I got divorced in 2015 and I went back to doing what I knew how to do, which was magic. And that led to the run on Broadway with the Illusionists. So it's a 50-50. It's whatever is the gig that I have coming up at the time, that's where the energy is going. And the most important part of the creative cycle that artists go through, ironically enough, is the part that artists are the worst at. And that is resting in between creation. You have an idea, you work on it and create it, you practice it, you perform it, and then ideally you rest and allow your brain and body to decompress and to do something that is not related to the work. Artists have a hard time, and we will go just again and again what the next thing is and do the next thing, and that's how we get burnt out. And for me, music and magic are similar enough that they scratch the itch for me, but they are different enough that I can rest while doing the other one, which is good. So if I'm focusing on magic, I don't have to think about music and composition. I don't have to think about how I am going to resolve this chord into this while counting so many syllables and making sure the lyrics fit and the harmonies are put together and whatnot. And then when I'm focused on music, I don't have to think about creating a script and what exactly is it in there that I want to put psychologically so people will remember things a certain way and so on and so forth. So it's a nice balance for me.
So this is not similar, but it's similar.
Yeah, hit me.
My job, a couple of jobs ago, I worked for a company called the Decor Group. They were the United States. They were the largest, not that there's a lot of people competing, but they were the largest Christmas light franchise company in the country.
Okay, that's pretty niche.
And yeah, and there it was fun going to work every day because you would walk through to my office that we had this huge showroom of Christmas trees and nativity sets and Santas and snowmen, and just like in middle of July you're seeing in there it's Christmas.
Yep.
But what I found fascinating is their premise was they'd go, "Hey Sasha, you own a swimming pool cleaning company,
Okay.
or you own a lawn service, or you own seasonal business, right?
Sure.
And in the fall, you have to lay off your employees because there's no business. What we can do is we can show
Ah,
you how to sell Christmas lights, how to install them on people's homes, how to decorate their homes, keep your people employed.
Floyd, yeah,
Yeah, you actually have a customer base of people you're already helping. You can go do that. We
that's
will
smart.
teach you the method. And then, so starting in October, November, you start putting up Christmas lights. In January, you take them down. And then by February, it's time to get back into the lawn business, right?
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so what I met with a lot of the franchise owners, and they said what's amazing is October, November, the guys are just thrilled. They're putting on elf caps, they're just singing things. And then by January, they cannot stand Christmas and
So,
they are ready to go back to do the other job. So I said it's like at a gym, right? You're working on different parts of your body so you
Yes.
don't get bored.
That's
So
it.
yeah,
You're cycling through and you're allowing the muscles that you just worked out to be able to rest and recover as you're working other ones.
yeah,
I actually want to ask you a question about that because from a performance standpoint for me,
yeah,
Magic has come with doing shows for Christmas almost every year
yeah,
for the last 2 decades for me. I have had a handful of Christmases where I did not have to work,
yeah,
but there were some years where I celebrated Christmas 97 times in between Thanksgiving, which was opening day, and
yeah.
New Year's Day, which was closing. And I'm curious for you, having worked in Christmas lights, if that was the case for you, if that desensitized you to the magic of Christmas and sort of your feelings about that, or if you were able to maintain that, your
I
feelings
was
on that.
able to maintain it. What was interesting is the how busy we get, right? All of a sudden, everyone's needing Christmas lights and they need to
Right.
order them and how we're doing, and we need more trees and we're doing all this. Yeah, it didn't give me too much of that. Luckily, I only worked there a year and then I
Right.
ended up getting back to another business. But I always think of that whole concept of, and when I see signs putting up Christmas lights, I always smile and
Right.
go that this guy's probably an indoor painter and now he's being putting up the lights. So it's good.
That's cool.
What is what challenges you most both in music and then in magic? What are the challenges?
So, a couple of different things, and I'm going to start with the magic side of that just because this is fresh in my head. So, we just did for an illusionist named Brad Ross. I went to St. Louis for the last 2 weeks or thereabouts, and we did an installation of his illusion show into the park, into their theater there. This is the first time that we'd ever done Six Flags in St. Louis. Last year, he was at a place called Carowinds in North Carolina, that actually the North Carolina and South Carolina state line runs right through the center of the park. And so that was a whole different set. So, in terms of just the show, and this bleeds into music a little bit, regardless of if you have a writer, the conditions under which you have to put the show in are always a little up in the air, and very rarely does everything go exactly as it is supposed to. Case in point, when we got there, we had done all of the pre work, we had all of the meetings. Brad went and did a site visit. He was able to get everything taken care of. But because that particular park, and all the love in the world to them, this is not me slamming them even a little bit,
Yeah.
because of COVID, they had not had a show in that theater in the last 4 years. And so it was bringing the theater back to life almost from scratch, which meant the plot that they had given to us in terms of here's where to hang the curtains and this is our fly system and how things work did not match what the actual reality was in there. And there was a lot of problem solving that had to be done in real time while artists were trying to rehearse and the dancers were learning their choreography and things as we're trying to coexist in this to hit the deadline. I always say that theater people make the best project managers because in my entire theater career, I've never had to push back a deadline because the deadline is opening night and you make it work.
Yeah, I think there is something about that. Okay, we just got to figure it out. We just can't. One of the things that I love is Penn will talk about on the podcast, and his co-host Matt talks about it. If you've never been in a meeting with Penn and Teller, you're going to be uncomfortable because they're not polite to each other. And Penn was saying, yeah, because we don't have time. And so if I have an idea and Teller thinks it's a stupid idea, if I can't convince him in just a minute why it's good, we move
Throw it
on.
out.
We
Yep.
throw it out, right? He says too many people waste time on trying to, let's get to the next good idea then,
Yep.
right? And
Absolutely that.
and I love that idea. Now, let's talk about music, and then I'm
Yeah.
going to have another question for you. What frustrates you about music
So
or the challenge?
in terms of music, I think the biggest challenge these days is being noticed in all of the noise. We it The reality of being a musician in 2025 is incredibly daunting, especially if you're young, because you cannot just be a good musician. You have to be a content creator, you have to understand marketing, you have to understand social media and how their algorithms work and how and when to post and how much and how long the video is going to be and what the schedule is. And it is all consuming and exhausting to be able to do that. And that is all of what you have to do in order to be relevant, in order to have the almighty algorithm recognize that you are going to get pushed in front of more people who will then see you. It's like a double-edged sword, technology and the internet and social media specifically, because it has connected us together and allowed us to discover each other and our art and what we do. But there is so much of it. And when you mix that with giant platforms, who shall remain nameless here, pushing the content that is paying them to do, you have this artificial view of what's happening. One of the main things Fairview wants to do, we are a benefit corporation, so that is to say we've identified 6 different pillars that fulfill a direct benefit to the community, and we are bound by law to fulfill those and document how we are doing that every year at an annual meeting. We are going to be utilizing algorithms that are straight just what you're interested in. We are not going to be engaging in any data brokerage and any platform advertising. Artists can do what they want to do in their own view and bring their own sponsors with them if they have them from elsewhere. But it is so frustrating as a musician to have to do all of that other stuff when all I want to do is write music and play it for people. That's kind of that. So it's rough. And I was born in 1982, which, depending upon which sociologist you speak to, either makes me an elder millennial or what's called a xennial, which I grew up with analog technology and then learned the digital technology as it was being developed. So I
Yeah.
understand about both, and I don't need either of them. I can exist with or without. But even with that skill set, things move so fast nowadays, and it is very easy to, like you said, to be an old man about it and cross my arms and be like, I don't want to do that. It's dumb.
Yeah.
It might be dumb, but that's also how people are booking gigs, and promoters are looking at how many monthly listeners you have on Spotify.
And it is one of the things that frustrates me as a podcaster because what I love is
Oh, yeah,
talking to people. This is what I love, having a conversation with you. And then you we have a great conversation, and then you got to try to get people to listen to it.
exactly.
And I'm really bad at that part of it. And so what I've decided is, would I love more downloads? Absolutely. But I do this out of love. And so if the person and I talked to had a good time, and I get even once or twice a year someone saying, "Hey, I really like that episode."
Nice.
That's nice because even people who love podcasts don't think to go, "Oh, I should give feedback." Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, the way to change that would be to start a whole campaign based off of social media, making short little videos to remind
Yeah,
people, hey, do this because here's what happens. And it's this crazy circle of what's
it
happening.
is. Yeah.
I don't want to promise anything, but I will say music is not the only thing that Fairview is going after. And eventually we've got big
Okay,
plans,
good.
possibly for podcasts coming
Okay,
up
we'll
at some
see.
point. So stay
Yeah.
tuned.
Yeah. And I've talked to multiple musicians, and they will say the hour and a half, 2 hours I'm on stage is the easiest part of my job.
100%. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's the scheduling, driving the van, figuring out who gets, how often do we stop for bathrooms, who gets a bed tonight, who's going to sleep in the van, all
So
this thing.
So I'll tell you what, I'll give you a glimpse into my situation. So because I live where I live in the Pacific Northwest, and my band is based out of the San Francisco Bay Area, so East
Yes.
Bay, Walnut Creek, Concord. I don't rehearse with them. I don't practice with them. When it comes time for us to play, my day looks like to get to that 45-minute set where I am on stage in makeup and singing at people and having them sing songs back in my face, which I love. For me to do that, it is catching the first flight out, which leaves at 5:45 in the morning. So at the airport at 3:45, getting
Yeah.
my guitar checked, taking care of that. Once I hit the Bay Area, then I've got to either have my bandmates pick me up, but they're all usually working because it's a Friday when I show up. So usually I take the mass transit system, the BART. I go to Walnut Creek. I walk a mile and a half to get to the drummer's house. From there, I crash, have a nap, get up. Then they start coming over. We load all of our gear. Then we have to load in, do a sound check, chat with the other bands, make sure that we are promoting and doing all of the social stuff. Hey, come and see the show. We're hitting stage in an hour. And then we actually get to do the thing. And then afterwards, it's load out and doing that and going and crash it. Like it's the easiest and best part is that 45 minutes on stage, and everything else is kind of mind numbing.
Yeah.
That's the working on the docks thing that Bruce is singing about in a musical context.
Absolutely. Do you find it sounds based on the stories you're telling that most of the magic is behind the scenes with you? You're helping to create the illusions versus being on stage? Is
So
that true?
So I'll tell you what, the position that I have occupied professionally for the last 20 years officially is called a magic technician, or what we would assume as a magic assistant.
Okay.
And what that means is half of my job is as a theatrical technician. So I understand carpentry. I know how to fix things when they break. I know how to put illusions together, illusion props. I can put something together in the dark just by feel, because oftentimes you're up to your elbows and you're doing things just by touch because the damn bolts are in the legs and you can't get
Yeah.
them and you can't take them apart. So it's doing all of that. It's knowing how to do pyrotechnics. And there was a show I did for a while where I had to set somebody on fire safely every night, and we do that by having a procedure and a protocol, and every single thing is done the same every night, and any deviation from that is a no-fly. And then the other half of that is during the actual show, and sometimes pre and post, is being on stage in costume, in character, and helping to do the magic while the magician is out being the focal point and making all of that happen. So it is understanding about human psychology and who is a good subject to pick and work with and who is not, being able to be present for the magician because it's all about making the magician look good. I have a book that I've been working on forever about magic assisting, which it'll come out someday, I'm sure, that deals with a concept called the magic circle, which apparently, if a magician actually could do magic, they would not have to reach more than an arm's length for anything to make happen. And so how that translates to my job would be if they are taking their coat off because they've got something up close and intimate that they want to do, they should be able to just hand that and let it drop and just have me be there. I will materialize, grab the thing, and not
Right.
invade on the scene. So it's knowing how to add to things by not being present or by being present just enough. So it really is a 50-50. And interestingly enough, that is how I got to work on Broadway, because the two locals that work Broadway, Equity and IATSE, local one up there, the technicians cannot get within sight lines of the audience. Their contract stops as soon as they step on stage and the audience can see. And they did not have anyone who could do the psychological performance part of the job. And then Equity is on stage, and as soon as they're off stage, their contract disappears. Equity didn't have anyone who was able to do the technical part and all of that. My buddy Russ and I, we were the two assistants for that. We got to go on contract for that particular show. It was called The Illusionists' Turn of the Century. It was like a classical recreation of a show you might see in 1903 during what we call the golden age of magic. And he and I got to do this gig based on the skills that we had and fitting into this gray area. But it was also really interesting because we had to pay attention to the rules of both.
I was going
So
to say you were both unions, right? You
yes,
were
yes.
union for you were both.
So the second that those props in their road cases hit the pavement in front of the theater, I was hands off. I could not touch anything. I could not build anything. I had to verbally take all of the union guys through, take this, put it together, turn that screw 3 times and 1/4, no more, or you'll break it, and it's a $3,000 fix. And then once everything was put together, once I was on stage, I was able to touch things and move around and do the whole thing. And then as I was pushing them off, there came a point where I had to immediately hands off and the guys would take it. And like it was this backstage ballet that actually was almost as interesting as what was happening on
I
stage.
bet it was. So when you're performing, you mentioned you've got five piece band. Are
Correct.
you a supporting player of that? Are you one of the leads? What's your role in the band?
I'm the lead guitarist and I sing backup vocals, but musicians, we can play anything in an
Yeah.
emergency. Um, uh,
Why, when did you go from playing bass to lead guitar?
About 10, 15 years ago, I was a bass player for 20 years coming up, and I just loved the bass. It was amazing. It was huge into funk and slap bass and all of that stuff. And it wasn't until I was actually teaching that a good friend of mine, the lead singer from my high school punk rock band, he hit me up one day and he said, "Hey, I've got this new band I'm working with and we need a second guitarist." And I was like, "How about a bass player?" And he's, "We've already got a great bass player, but would you be interested in messing around with the guitar?" And one of the cool things about punk rock is if you can't play the instrument, that is not a stumbling block to being
Yeah.
in the band. Like you just go. And so I had always been playing with guitar and messing around with it. And so I stepped into that role and found out that I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I'm one of the songwriters. We all write songs and have bring ideas to the group. And then sometimes they are fully formed. Sometimes I will give them full demos and say, "Here are your parts, learn this." Sometimes it will be more like, "Here's a riff or here's an idea. Here's some lyrics. Put United Defiance this. Make it sound the way that it's going to sound with us." But there are two guitars, and the rhythm guy is also an incredible lead player. And he and I have started into kind of writing things for each other and doing double dragon solos and stuff like that. So that's been a lot of fun.
What haven't you got to do creatively that you still want to? What else is giving you an itch?
I'll tell you what, I have always halfway joked about this, except it's not a joke. My retirement career, I would love to score film.
Okay.
I would adore to be able to do that, to have someone bring me their movie and say, "Here's the mood," and do a bunch of descriptors, and then be able to write some music to be able to fulfill that. The other thing, and maybe this one is even more relevant. So we would call it a podcast these days, although it's an audio drama. It's like a radio drama where I have a story, I read the story, I do the voices or bring voice actors in to do the dialogue. There's music that is happening there. All of the sound effects are in, and it's an immersive, like a radio drama. I would love to figure out a way to take that project. The project is called Magoosh Medrick Vampire Hunter. It's like an Inspector Clouseau style vampire hunter. It's zany and weird and wacky and hyper violent, but like in a Monty Python tongue in cheek Black Knight sort of way.
Okay.
And it's about a vampire hunter who has no skills whatsoever. And when the battle shows up, he closes his eyes and everything goes wrong. But it goes wrong in exactly the proper order. It's high physical comedy. And then he opens his eyes and everything's dead except for him. I would love to figure out a way how to translate that into animation. I think that would be delightful. It would add itself to the zany slapstick style of the writing, which is great. And I don't know. We'll see. I've got one season posted up on YouTube. I've got another two that are produced, and I'm sitting on those for a little bit. But once I get three under my belt, I'm going to get out there and hopefully figure out a way to start pitching to some studios because I would love to see that animated. Animation's next.
Very cool. So, Sasha, what should I have asked you that I haven't?
I would say that you should have asked me, that sounds so strange saying, how exactly can people find out about what Fairview is up to and how can they support us? Because here's the thing, we've been talking in the abstract about blue collar musicians, but let's get real specific about this.
Please.
I guarantee that you and all of your listeners, anyone who is listening to this, a musician who has been struggling, who has been not in a negative way necessarily, but who is at the mercy of an industry that does not support them and is not designed to be able to let them make a living with their art. And so I would say, in order to help them, you can help Fairview, and we're out there for them. It's Telson and I who we've been in the trenches. I think that's why we're the right people to do this. We're not a couple of suits who figured out how to write an algorithm to be able to prioritize songs that are popular sounding. We deeply love musicians. We have a couple of projects that we do. We do something called an interview, which is just talking with musicians about their background and where they come from and who they are. We do something called an overview, which is more behind the scenes and things about tech and business. And then we do a healthy view, which is me doing something that's good for my health, working out while listening to music and discovering new bands and giving them shout outs and getting them in front of people to take care of doing that. If you are interested in helping a musician in your life and supporting them in a way that you don't even have to pay for, check out Fairview, check out our website, Fairview, that's fairvu.net, and come and have a look at what we're up to. We do have an online store, which all of everything that is purchased, all of the virtual goods that we have there go directly to helping build this platform for musicians, which will empower them to be able to take control of their financial lives.
Very nice. I'm going to give you a chance in a few minutes to give you some final thoughts,
Yeah.
but I end every podcast with the Mary question. And what that is, Jay Armstrong, who is now retired, but he was a English teacher in the Philadelphia area. And
Mhm.
he would teach at the honors English class, and he would give his students the lyrics to Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road. And
Yeah.
he would treat it as if it was a poem, and they would discuss it as if it was Robert Frost or another other poets. And
Amazing.
then and at the end of the day, he would ask the class, okay, do you think Mary gets in the car? So Sasha, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Okay. You're going to have to stick with me on this.
No,
Uh,
I love it.
because this is such an interesting question. I was aware of Thunder Road. I had heard it years ago, but we're probably 25 years ago, and I have not
Okay.
given it a single thought since then until you said, "Hey, I'm going to ask you the Mary question." I was like, "Oh my gosh." So I went back and I listened to it. And there are a couple of lines in there which struck me as interesting. First and foremost, amazing song. Bruce is an incredible songwriter, and one of his strengths is being able to tell a story with vivid, evocative language that one of the things I love that he does, and this bothers a lot of people, he will sacrifice a rhyme in order to get the proper word in there to finish out the phrase that he is going with. So he will do it. Sometimes it's a near rhyme, sometimes he's don't care, and he does the proper word. So I respect that. But there's a couple of lines in here which are worrying to me. The first one is the line where he talks about you ain't no beauty, but that's okay with me.
Yeah, you're in a beauty, but hey, you're all right.
But hey, you're all right. Yeah. I looking at the context of when this was written, I think that was not meant to be insulting. I don't think it was meant to be a negative thing. And from the context of the lyrics, I would say that this couple, whoever the singer is, and then Mary, I think probably they had a prior relationship or they have been dancing around it for years. Maybe they were childhood friends coming up, and he might be close enough to her to be able to make a comment like that. But that was a little red flaggy to me
So
because,
I usually wait till the end, but
okay,
I'm loving this discussion. So in my mind canon is that Mary often makes fun of herself. She is the type that, oh, I'm not very pretty. Who would
okay,
want me? And so he is doing what you do when you sell. You're bringing up pre-saying the thing she's going to say. And
okay.
there we go. Now, my wife says no. He's calling her ugly. She should not get in the car. But anyway, that just continue on. That was
So
just, yeah.
no, so this is a fascinating context because you're right. If that is how you're interpreting that, that changes everything. And that means that they are close enough for him to be able to. Maybe this is an ongoing thing. Ah, you're not a beauty anyway. Maybe she's
Yeah.
dropped dead. And there's that line towards the end that talks about all of the boys leave with ghosts in their eyes after she sends them away, which sounds like she's had a lot of suitors.
Yes.
And he's there to do that. Okay, next line that kind of struck with me. The door's open, but the ride ain't free. In a 2025 context, that is can be interpreted as a little creepy, and that quid pro quo is being suggested here. I had, prior to my fiance, I was with a young woman, my partner, for 4 years. She was 14 years younger than I was. She was in college. We met in New York and doing the whole thing. Had a wonderful time, great relationship. We're still close. We're good friends. But she and hanging out with her college friends at that time in 2018, 2019 gave me a context and a view into how her generation thinks. And that line would be a crazy red flag for her. she would be like, "Don't get in the car, Mary. That's
Yeah.
the worst thing that you could do." So those bells went off in my head. However, when this was written in 1973 or 1975, whenever it was, I could see how Bruce might have been referring to, if this, you and me, if this is going to work, the ride ain't free. We're going to have to work at it. It's not something that we can just do and
Yeah.
cruise off. And I did some research and found an interview with him where he was playing the piano and going through the song almost line by line and talking about how he did it. And he said that you have to have a concrete plan. It's not enough to just have the magic. You have to have a plan in place. So I think that's where that's going. So I'm
Yeah.
okay. I'm okay with that. Last one that really stuck out to me here. He said, "I know you're waiting on words I ain't spoken." That seems to me like they were the couple that almost was but never was, and she has been waiting for years for him to say, "Finally, I love you."
Yes.
And I don't have anything other than the feeling of the lyrics and what's going on there. If in the abstract, and I'm sorry to give you a Schrodinger's cat
No.
answer on this, if in the abstract I were looking at this and she was comfortable with him, and that line about beauty, that they have a friendship and it goes back, and he acknowledges this is a town full of losers and I'm headed out of here and I want you to come with me, that might be great. I would be okay with her getting in the car. If this were my daughter and I put my daughter, who's 14, into this context here, I would be like, "Mary, don't get in the damn car."
Yes.
My
I,
my my
yeah.
answer, and I'm not going to leave you on the both and neither at the same time. I would say I think she does not get in the car, and that is me interpreting that from the context previously and for today. I don't think she needs the dude. And had he taken the time to speak the words he ain't spoken before, I
Yeah.
think he lost his shot. I don't think she gets in.
So I love that answer. It's about 50-50. Half people say yes, half people say no. I and I love the long story. No offense. The worst thing is, yeah, she gets in the car. I need a little more than that.
Yeah, of course. Why? Talk to
Yeah,
me
yeah,
about your
yeah.
thoughts.
I've had people that Warren Zane, who wrote the book Deliver Me from Nowhere, the story of Nebraska, and that's the new film that's coming out this fall,
Okay.
was based on that book. He said that this is all in the imagination. He said, I don't remember her name, but he said, Ellen Sue, I
Mhm.
asked her out 1,000 times in high school and never spoke to her at once. He says, I think
Yes.
this is all in our narrator's mind because he'll never get the courage to go
Okay.
talk to her.
That's
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, I had a lady that went yearling, and I will try to find it. If I do, I'll email you.
Please, I'd be
She,
interested.
yeah, she basically said that he's a serial killer, and no, she should not get in the car. She just had all these things, and I said, I now want you to come on my show and break down
Yeah,
Bruce
back it up.
Springsteen albums, like songs every year, because she was worried I'd be offended. So yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think it depends, right? Because he says, I know you're lonely for words that I ain't spoken. Tonight we'll be free. All the promises will be
Will
broken.
be broken. Yeah.
So is that because he's finally going to say what he says? And so it was 7 or 8 years ago, maybe longer than that, when Jay was on the podcast and he was telling me, like, yeah, and oh, by the way, I'm an English teacher and I do this. And
Nice.
I'm like, what? Of course she gets in the car. What? It's not even a discussion. And he goes, no. And
So
he
good.
actually came on and did a mini 45-hour kind of breakdown of how they broke apart and everything.
Okay.
And when he says, this is a choice,
Yeah.
and every time you make it's scary to make a choice. And
Yep.
anytime you choose something, you're refusing something else. And his question is, he doesn't think Mary has the courage to make that choice to go forward. And he says, I
Interesting.
don't think I'd like the song as much if she did. Other people say, oh, absolutely, she does. One of my favorites, and as a musician, you'll love this. Guy says, okay, if it's Bruce and the E Street Band playing it live, she gets in the
Yep.
car because it's
Oh
this
yeah.
triumphant ending. When it's Bruce solo on the guitar, She doesn't get in the car because if you hear the end, how he fades away.
I do love that. That's yeah, him playing that in London at Hammersmith in
Yeah,
75 with just the piano and his voice and the harmonica. Yeah,
yeah,
she doesn't get in the car. I love that.
yeah,
I would say to finish off my answer on that,
yeah,
and this comes from a perspective, it's a feminist perspective and it's something that I deeply
yeah,
espouse. She doesn't get in the car because she doesn't need him. She has
yeah,
all of the stuff going for her, and I think she is smart enough to see him for what he is. If she
yeah.
actually did mean anything, he would have said the words ago and they would have gone down that. And it sounds a little bit like he could be drunk and shooting his shot for the night, and all promises will be broken. Mary,
Yeah.
just
So one of my good friends, Terry, said no,
just go to bed.
but later he does work on himself and he does come older
Okay.
and then he earns the right and she goes then. Someone else jokingly said, yes, she gets in the car, but when he stops for cigarettes, she gets out.
Okay,
She's
there
like,
you
what
go.
am I doing here?
There you go.
Yeah,
I,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think my favorite is if it's Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, she gets in the car, and if
Yeah.
it's Bruce solo, she doesn't. I think that is the most eloquent, beautiful answer to
Yeah.
that we've discussed yet.
Yeah. We could spend a whole discussion on Bruce, what were you thinking? Hey, little girl, is your daddy home?
Yeah, right.
It's whoa, different context, right? A different time.
Yeah,
Sasha, this was so much fun.
this was, man. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been a blast.
Final thoughts and how can someone reach you?
Final thoughts, if you love music, if you are a fan, if you are a musician yourself, have a look at what we are up to. So Fairview, that is Fairvu. We are on all the social platforms. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. By all means, come and check out our YouTube channel. We've got a bunch of videos. If you are a musician, I would love to interview you. I want to hear all about who you are, what your background is, and what your experience has been in the music industry. Because no matter what you're going through, and I don't mean this as like a self-help therapy tone, but I will say you're not alone. You are a member of an elite group of people, of human beings who are compelled to create music for other human beings, and we are doing so against all the odds, and I want to hear what your story is.
I love that. Let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. I'm game. That sounds
I just
great.
had so much fun. Listeners, go to the website, check it out, check out his podcast narrative, check out some music, and let him know what you're thinking. For now, everyone, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.